Attention, everybody. The views and opinions expressed on the show are not necessarily those of Acts Ministry, Acts Media Group, and or their affiliate and subordinate ministries and or nonprofits. So he's back today. He's color coordinated. He's very interesting. And he's waiting to talk to you. Dr. Steve Albrecht. It's crime time.
Thanks, Producer Matt, and welcome to Crime Time. This is Crime Time Podcast episode 49, coming up on 50 here next week, 50 episodes. Dr. Steve Albrecht, I'm joining you from the Acts Media Group Studios in Springfield, Missouri. For this hour, we'll be talking about burglary prevention, and specifically home burglary prevention. One of the things that we've seen in the COVID quarantine is that more people are home, obviously, and quarantining, and that means the home burglary rate has fallen quite dramatically. Now, unfortunately, that means the commercial burglary rate is up higher because people are leaving their businesses unsecured or not as secured as they could. That's a topic for another show, but we will talk about home burglary prevention here today. So thanks for listening to Crime Time, where we talk about crime and crooks and cops and personal security. We'll talk about some dangerous people and some heroes and even some stupid crooks. I've got a good stupid crook story for you today. Most importantly, we'll talk about what you can do to keep yourself and your family safe from crime and violence. And as always, you need to be vigilant at home and in your neighborhood and in your community and at school and at work and even on the road. And this show exists to make you feel more empowered, more secure, and certainly more educated about security issues and the criminal justice system. As background, I worked for the San Diego Police Department for 15 years as a patrol officer, a reserve sergeant, and a domestic violence investigator. I now work as a security consultant, and I teach HR-related training workshops. My focus is on workplace violence and security issues related to that. I've written 23 books on business and workplace violence subjects, police subjects, and on guns, which you can find on Amazon. All three of my gun books are on Amazon Kindle. That's Albrecht on Guns, Albrecht and Farrow. My partner Mike Farrow on Guns is Volume 2, and then Albrecht on Guns Volume 3. Each of those books is on Amazon Kindle, so I appreciate you taking a look at those if you're into firearms. You can always reach me at my website, crimetimeradio.com, where you can send me an email. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's Dr. Steve Albrecht. That's Albrecht. And you can certainly follow me on Twitter at Dr. Steve Albrecht. And you can find past episodes of this show on SoundCloud.com and also new ones on YouTube every week at this time. So home burglaries. We'll talk about what the burglary prevention looks like for you. You don't necessarily need a big, expensive security system. We'll talk about some creative ways to do these things to keep your house safe. You live in an apartment, you live in a mobile home, you live in a condo, you live in a house. You have some areas of concern in terms of burglaries, and specifically when you're not in the house is the time that we're most thinking about these things. Burglars are typically a daytime activity. Burglaries that happen at nighttime are much more dangerous. They're called hot prowls. These are the situations where people are coming into your home, bad guys into your home at nighttime. When you are sleeping with your family, those are certainly more dangerous than daylight burglaries, so we'll talk about the difference there. So certainly home burglaries are way down because of the pandemic. People are staying at home. They're protecting their homes and families much more now than they used to because obviously they're there during daylight hours. And most burglaries are committed by drug addicts. We'll talk about that. Most burglaries are committed by teenagers. We'll talk about that as we go forward. So commercial burglaries are up. That's certainly a concern. People are closing their businesses, but they're leaving their stock inside. They're leaving their valuables, their equipment, their tools, their things like that inside their facilities. That is another concern for us for another show is commercial burglary prevention. And also, certainly what we've seen around the country is looting and the issues connected to looting for businesses as well is another serious concern. So we define burglary. It's different in a lot of penal codes, but we define burglary as entering a dwelling with the intent to commit theft or any other felony. So you could be arrested for arson, where you burned down a building, you came inside, you started the fire. That is also another felony, so it would be burglary and arson. Somebody breaks into a home and sexually assaults somebody, that would be burglary plus rape. When you look at burglary, it is an intent to enter any kind of dwelling. That could be a shed, a building, a car, something like that, where you don't necessarily have to break in. Just coming inside is committing the crime. Breaking in is a separate part of it. But it's intent to commit theft or any felony. So typically we look at these situations as somebody coming in to steal property. And you know, what's the reason for it? Well, they're typically paying for a drug habit. Most drug addicts steal. They start from stealing from their family. They get kicked out of their house. They start from stealing from their employer if they have one, And once they run out of people to steal from, then they start to steal from you and I. So they choose the path of least resistance, which is they come into unlocked houses, unlocked garages, unlocked cars. They steal cars that have the keys on the ignition. They steal cars that have the keys on the dashboard. They steal things from cars that are left inside, like guns and jewelry and coins and cash and electronics and equipment and cell phones. They steal things from your garage when your garage is open on during the week or the weekend when you're home. Your kids' bicycles, your tools, your yard equipment if they can get it out of there, anything that's valuable that they can pawn. So how the deal works with pawn shops is they typically get 10 cents on the dollar. So think about the average heroin addict who has started off maybe being a decent guy, and he had an opiate addiction based on some kind of injury or something like that, but he switched over to heroin because it's easier to get and cheaper than the pills. Let's say that you're a pretty well-established heroin addict and you have a $100 a day habit. A $100 a day habit of heroin means that about every 6 hours, you have to inject liquid heroin into your veins, and every 6 hours you've got to come up with enough money to buy your heroin. So $100 a day, let's say $25 every 6 hours you're spending on heroin. So let's use $100 as our kind of cut line for what you have to steal from. Unfortunately, when you go to a pawn shop with the things that you steal from our house, my house, your house, you only get 10 cents on the dollar. So somebody steals to get $100 worth of heroin, they need to steal $1,000 worth of stuff. So let's do the heroin math here. Let's say you have a $100 a day heroin habit. Unfortunately for you, if you're a heroin addict, it doesn't take the weekends off. You don't get Saturdays and Sundays off from your heroin addiction. If you look at 7 days a week at $100 a day, that's $700. Okay, so these guys have to come up with $700 a week to be able to afford their habit. The answer is no. If you only get 10 cents on the dollar from the pawn shop, then you have to come up with $1,000 a day times 7 is $7,000 a week. So let's break out the math. If you look at $100 a day heroin habit, let's just take it over 30 days, it's $3,000. Well, if it's $1,000 a day that you have to steal, it's $30,000 a month. Think about that, $30,000 a month. That's why these guys steal everything that's not nailed down: tools, equipment, guns, your uncle's stamp collection or coin collection, whatever they can get their hands on, they think they can turn into money. So certainly there's legitimate pawn shops out there, but there's also people called fences, and what they do is they give these guys 10 cents on the dollar. One of the things I used to see a lot in California was these guys would go to steal something from Home Depot or Lowe's, and then Saturday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning they'd be standing out in the parking lot going, I bought this old Milwaukee drill here, and they won't give me my money back. You want to give me $100 for it, or $50 for it, or $60 for it? And somebody buys a stolen piece of equipment from Home Depot or Lowe's just because this guy's standing out front with the bargain of the year. So back to the heroin math, $30,000 a month is quite a lot. Multiply that by 12 months, $360,000 a year that these guys can steal. I mean, the average heroin addict sometimes can steal $500,000 worth of stuff over the course of 18 months or so. So when we put these guys in jail for their addictions, we put them in jail for their burglaries. We actually put a pretty big dent in the crime rate in our communities. So it's not just a drug crime issue, it's a property crime issue. And these folks are stealing from you and stealing from me the stuff that we've worked for our family heirlooms, things that are valuable or expensive in our homes. So we want to do everything we can to keep these guys out of our houses. So besides heroin addicts and meth addicts that steal, and that's usually a daytime thing, also kids. So we look at teenagers and they steal as well. And teenage burglaries is usually kind of a thrill thing. It's kind of a group thing. They typically do things in 2s and 3s or 4s. If you look at heroin addicts or meth addicts, they're doing that stuff by themselves. They don't want to share the loot. But when we look at people that are doing these types of things as kids, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, it's typically kids that aren't in school and they're just cruising around looking for something to do in terms of stealing. So they look at your house and they try to figure out whether you're home. They certainly don't want to confront anybody. They don't want to get shot. They don't want to get bit by a dog. So they'll go up to the front door and ring the doorbell. If nobody answers, then they start to walk around the house and try to figure out how to get inside. And that's really one of the best ways for you to think about how you protect your home. As a starting point for burglary prevention, think about your house and what you would need to do if you were locked out. Let's say you didn't have your keys and you needed to get inside. And so how would you get inside? And you say, well, I always leave The upstairs window that leads into my daughter's room, or the upstairs window that leads into my bedroom, is always unlocked because we want the cool breeze in there. I'll just take this ladder that's on the side of my house here, the one that I keep, that's the 18-foot ladder on the side of my house here. I'll put that up against the roof, and then I'll climb inside my own window. Well, that's the way these guys think as well, these crooks. You say to yourself, well, I have a pretty good firewood collection outside my house. I've got hatchets and axes, and I've got mauls and all kinds of stuff to move the logs around, and those are the things I leave next to my wood pile. Those are the things the guys that are burglars use to break into your house as well. So you got to think like a crook, and one of the easiest ways to do that is just walk around at nighttime and say, okay, how would I get into my house if it was the evening time and I didn't have a flashlight and I didn't have any way to get in? What would I do to get into my house? Would I go to an unlocked basement door? Would I go to a side door to a shed where I have a spare key, which the bad guy can find usually pretty quickly? Would I put my spare key in one of those fake rocks that looks pretty obvious in my garden that the bad guy can also find? So thinking like a crook, thinking like a burglar, how would you get into your house? And the answer should be, it's pretty tough. It's pretty difficult to get into your home because of the way you have it secured. So let's talk about what we need to do for that. When you look at protecting your house and you say, okay, I don't need to put everything into a safe, but there are certain things that you need a safe for, and I'm a big believer in safes, especially for firearms. We look at gun safes, which sometimes can weigh 800, 600, 800 pounds. That thing's not getting carted away. I have smaller safes in my house, and they're bolted to the floor. I mean, it would take you a while to get the safe off the concrete that I have bolted to the floor in my house. So you don't necessarily need a 600-pound safe to put stuff into. And also, we look at what we're trying to protect. And if it's really super valuable, I mean, get a safe deposit box at your bank. If you've got grandma's heirloom jewelry, or you've got something in your family which is super important and valuable and you never want to lose it, then put it in a safe deposit box at your bank. But you think about stuff that crooks steal in your house, and it's things that they can carry away, and they actually use your pillowcases from your bed to carry away your stuff, which is sort of ironic. So they'll put into a pillowcase the stuff that they can tote away. It's cell phones, it's laptops, it's tablets, it's firearms, it's jewelry, it's cash that people leave laying around. It's things that they value or they see as having some value at a pawn shop later on. It could be your kid's electric guitar. There's lots of things that folks want to steal from your house. So it doesn't mean you have to put everything that you own under lock and key, but the really important stuff should be in a safe, and that safe should be hidden away, and it should be covered, with clothing or other things that don't make it obvious where it is, and it needs to be bolted to the floor or heavy enough so that it can't be moved. So think about how your front door is designed. You probably have a front door like I do, which is a lot of glass. And so it's tough to keep people out of your house if you have glass that leads into the front door, which they break and they unlock your door and come inside. So we'll talk about two types of locks. One type of lock is what is called a single throw, and the other is a double throw. Single throw locks is just a knob that you turn, and too many people have a front door lock with just a knob on it. Single throw knobs are easy to defeat. You just break the glass and unlock it and come inside. Double throw locks have a key, and so the only issue about front door locks that have a key lock in them is you got to have the key nearby so you don't get trapped inside in a fire when you're trying to get out of the house. But you think about double throw locks, those involve a key to lock the door on both sides, the front and the back, the front on the inside, to get you inside the house. So one of the problems with doors is that our decorators and architects and people that manufacture this stuff really like beautiful glass, and we have tinted glass and smoked glass and all kinds of really cool designs, but it's not the safest in the world in terms of protecting your house. I like a solid door for the front door that has maybe a small window up at the top or a little bit of glass that you can see up, but not so much that it's easy to break it and just come inside. But then you think about what else we do for our houses. We have tons of glass in our windows around the house that is beautiful and gorgeous and easy to break into. We have lots of glass for our French doors and lots of glass for our sliding glass doors that are going around our house. So it's really tough to protect your house if you've got a lot of glass. And so then we're going to start talking about things like camera systems and alarms. So if you look at the outside of your house and you say, I have a lot of shrubbery, a lot of landscaping, a lot of stuff that's easy to hide behind, that's an issue that you want to address as well. You don't want to have to cut away your beautiful plants, but sometimes you have to cut away your beautiful plants. The stuff that can be hidden behind and stuff that people can stay off the road away from passing police cars or passing neighbors, things like that, is a lot of that landscaping and shrubbery needs to be cut way back. We'll talk about a concept called CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And CPTED is a way to look at how we can use existing things like landscaping to protect our buildings, to protect our homes. For example, a cool thing to put around your windows, if you have landscaping around your windows in your house, is sticker bushes, rose bushes, things like that. Kids, teenage crooks, burglars, bad guys in general, don't like to crawl through that stuff, especially at nighttime to get to the window. They don't like to get scratched up like anybody else does. So that is an example of a SEPTED solution, crime prevention through environmental design. Disneyland uses SEPTED all the time. Disneyland has hedges that go up to these fences that go around Disneyland. The fences are 18 and 20 and 22 feet high. So when you think about these beautiful hedges covered with all kinds of really cool ivy and things, not only is it a physical deterrent because you can't see inside what's going on, and also people aren't going to climb up on that stuff, especially when the fence is that high. So a SEPTED solution would be fencing with stuff attached to it, like landscaping or sticker bushes, stuff like that, and we'll talk about it. So if you look at your house at nighttime, you say, where are the logical hiding places that people would hide? Over behind your shed, or in this corner over here where it's dark, or where your unattached garage attaches to your garage. There's a little crawl space there. Think about how lighting can improve those things. And I like lights that are on all the time. I like lights that come on with sensor motion and things like that. For example, another SEPTED solution is, and think about this kind of from the logic of being a 10 or 12-year-old, K through 6 schools don't typically light up the school at nighttime. So when they close, the school is dark. Why is a K through 6 school, why wouldn't they have exterior lights and lights in the hallways and things like that? Well, because little kids are afraid of the dark. And so if you're 10 years old and you think you want to go to the school and vandalize it or something like that, you're less likely to do it because little kids don't typically like the dark as much as adults do. That's why they don't have lights on in K through 6 schools. Now, junior high and high school, different story. Kids aren't afraid of the dark at that age. So those are SEPTED, or crime prevention through environmental design solutions. So we'll talk about ways to think about cameras. We'll talk about ways to think about lighting outside your house. And we'll talk about some of the more recent and kind of big name things that are out there in terms of Ring doorbells or Simply Safe or places like ADT, which you may want to use as well. There's some pros and cons. Look at where you think burglars least want to be exposed, and it's typically for noise. And so there's kind of a pro and con there. One is they don't like drawing attention, which brings dogs and things to bark and maybe wakes people up at nighttime, or certainly maybe alerts the neighbors that might be paying attention to what's going on in your house. The other thing, dogs are cheap insurance, and we'll talk about that as well, is alarm systems. So I think there's a big pro and con for alarm system. In days of old, people had ringing burglar alarms, and they would ring to beat the band. They'd ring to keep you up, 2 miles away. You'd hear these things, and one of the problems is a couple problems. One, they're sort of like car alarms. People stop paying attention to them. So if you're in your office or you're at home and you hear a car alarm and it's not yours outside, you're at somewhere and you hear a car alarm. Typically, you might look outside to see what's going on, but you wouldn't necessarily go out there, and try to see if you need to call the police. Most times people think, well, it's probably a false alarm, or it's not my car, or it's going to reset itself in a couple minutes. If you look at burglar alarms, a lot of communities in the United States started charging alarm fees to install burglar alarms, and a lot of communities started charging alarm fees when false alarms went off. So the cops would come to a warehouse or a home or a business with a ringing alarm, and it would go off, kind of on an all-the-time basis because the sensors were set poorly, or it went off in a windy night, or storms caused it to go off, or there were a lot of false alarms because of your kids or your cat going by the sensor or something like that. People started getting charged for burglar alarm responses by the PD, and those fees could get quite high. I mean, some cities, when you get up to the third or fourth time, it could be $500 for the police to come out to your house or your business. So when we look at burglar alarms, let's say old school burglar alarm with a ringing annunciator. You've got some kind of siren or ringing annunciator outside your house, and it rings. There's a sense in the old days that somehow that would startle the burglar into not wanting to come inside the house. Well, I've talked to a lot of burglars. Guess what they do when the alarm goes off? They work faster. They load your pillowcase full of more stuff quicker because they know, even in a perfect world, if the cops are around the corner, it's going to take them 5 minutes to get there. And they know that typically someone from another house or a neighbor is not going to come over and confront them as they're leaving. So they just work faster. So I'm not a huge fan of a ringing burglar alarm from the standpoint of you think it's a deterrent because it drives people away, like you think a car alarm ringing would drive somebody away. I've seen crooks driving cars with car alarms going off as they've stolen the car. They drive away, and when we stopped them in the PD, the ringing alarm was still going. So obviously, the other solution would be that you have a ringing alarm, but it does not enunciate. It doesn't go out loud. It's something that the alarm company will hear, and then they'll call back to the house to see if there's anybody that picks up that gives them the predetermined code word, and if not, then they call the police. So we'll talk about that in just a second, the pros and cons of alarm systems. And then the other piece is cameras. And back in the old days, cameras were big and bulky and difficult to install and hardwired, and you'd need a lot of cable, and you'd have to put some big, monstrosity on the outside of your house, and then you'd have to run cable, through the walls and down to the power supply and things like that. Well, a lot of this stuff now is wireless, and it's small, and it's really, really good in terms of the quality, and it's cheaper. So there's some companies out there. Simply Safe is a well-known one, and we'll talk about that. That the technology is really good. And in the old days, and I remember doing this when I worked at a grocery store. We used to swap out the videotapes, the VHS videotapes every day. There was 31 tapes, and we put in the 15th, and then the next day we put in the 16th tape, and then the 17th, et cetera, each month. And we'd record from the camera system onto our video system that they'd be in these tapes. And God forbid we got robbed, then we'd give the tape to the cops, and the cops would take it to some technical lab, and they'd pull up a grainy photo of the bad guy that robbed us. Well, those days are over. Now everything is done to the cloud. Everything is done to DVRs, and that's sort of primitive DVRs, but everything is done to the cloud in terms of how we capture and copy stuff. The police can come in and say, give me 1017 to 1019, this little span of time here on a CD, and they take that back, or they can blow up certain pictures and make really good suspect photographs of the bad guys that do robberies and burglaries by just using these DVR or NVR network video systems, or the stuff that's stored up on the cloud. So we'll discuss that just a little bit in terms of the pros and cons of all that. When you look at what burglars carry, one of the things that seems sort of strange, but it's kind of based on an intuition that cops have, is the average police report may have 3 boxes to put the loss. So on a police report, it'll say it's a burglary, and here's all the description of the house and any suspect description if we have anything like that, or footprints or fingerprints. And then we look down and say, okay, what was the loss? And the loss in many police boxes is only 3 boxes. Why would they only put 3 boxes? Well, that's what most amateur burglars can carry away. They can carry away 3 things. They can carry away your laptop. They can carry away your cell phone. They can carry away a box of coins. I mean, whatever they steal, they typically can only carry away 3 things. That's amateur crooks. They mostly run off with what they can carry out from your house. Now, organized burglars, professional burglars, group burglars, those guys are a different set of cats completely. They come in, and this is sort of a scary scenario. They'll come in with a moving van. They'll come into your driveway with a truck that's covered, a panel truck. They'll come into your driveway with a big van that they can park right up next to your garage door. They can pry open your garage door. Now, garage doors are heavy. They weigh 400 to 600 pounds, but these guys can pry open the bottom of your garage door, crawl inside. And many people do the same thing, which is if their garage is attached to the house, once they leave and they go through the house and into the garage, and then they start their car and back up, and then they close their garage door. They don't think about locking their garage door, the transition door, back into the house. This is an important thing to do, and this is where you really, really need good double throw, solid doors, fire-rated doors, and good locks, good deadbolt locks. So here, this transition piece between your garage and your house is protected by this one door. And some houses have flimsy doors, and most people don't lock them. But think that if you manage to get into a bad guy manages to get into your garage, and he can be inside your garage, they have access to all kinds of tools to break into your house, even with a really good door there. But if you leave it unlocked, it makes it even easier for them. So they go right into your house, and then they can actually open the garage door. They know how to push the buttons, and back a truck or a van inside your garage and load up as much stuff from your house as they want to carry away. Antiques, your favorite grandfather clock, all the stuff that they can steal out of your kitchen and bedrooms and things like that and drive off with it. I've seen these cases where people in the neighborhood thought, oh, we thought you were having some work done, or we thought you were moving, or we thought these guys were, some repair people that you had come over. We waved to them and they waved back and they loaded up all your stuff and drove off. This is also made easier in two ways. One, that you don't have a relationship with your neighbors where they go, well, that seems odd. And Steve didn't tell me he was moving, and they would kind of look around and even call the police or the sheriff to say, hey, can you check this out? So that relationship with your neighbors is important. And then the second is that you have enough visibility around your house that people can see. And so I remember a case when I lived in California where this happened to some folks. These guys with a moving van came in and stole everything that wasn't nailed down. They took antique rugs and all kinds of stuff. Well, they had so much landscaping and bushes and really tall, coverage around their house that the driveway was blocked, and people sitting even outside the house would not have seen what was going on because they couldn't see up to the house. There's too much stuff in the way. So it's important to have, it's always good to have landscaping for privacy and things like that, but it's important to have line of sight from the road, the closest road to where you are, to the front door, the sides of your house, the garage, so people, including cop cars, and cops get a vibe off certain situations, like, well, why are these people moving here? It's not the end of the month, and this looks a little unusual, and we've had some cases like this. They may go check stuff out, and certainly they would if they get a call from a neighbor. So when you look at your relationships with your neighbors, I don't think you have to be bosom pals with everybody, but when you look at your relationship with your neighbors, you say, do I have at least passing first name basis with my neighbors, and they know what I do, and they know what time I leave for work, and they know what time I typically come home. And like for me, my example, my neighbor knows what car I drive, and I know what car my neighbor drives and his kids drive and his wife drives, and so we wave to each other. And so we're not bosom pals, but we know each other. We know each other's names, and sometimes when he's going to do something, he'll tell me like, hey, we're leaving for the weekend, and vice versa for me, so that we're paying attention to each other, and we have that sort of neighborhood watch thing going on. I'm a big believer in neighborhood watch. I think the concept is really good. I think it falls off the vine sometimes in terms of the organization. It starts off really strong, and then people get kind of bored, and there's sort of a volunteer sort of fatigue that people get, like, I don't want to, do I have to have another meeting about this? They just kind of want to get on with their lives. So it's important to create those kinds of relationships with each of your neighbors where you just say, hey, I'll watch out for you and you watch out for me. And, if anything seems unusual, could you call me on my cell phone? Anything seems unusual, I'll call you. Or could you just go ahead and call the PD or the sheriff right away? So let's think about what people, when they're thinking about protecting their house, let's think about cameras. And so cameras, I like them a lot. Now, people say to me, well, banks still get robbed and they have cameras. I'm like, yeah, I get it. But cameras really do a lot for us. One, I like signage that says, smile, you're on TV. And I have a bunch of those signs around my house, and I have cameras in my house, but I also have signs that say, you have to guess, burglar, whether or not you believe that I have cameras, because they're not obvious. But the idea of the signage at least says, you got to guess that there's cameras here. The one thing about cameras, though, you're going to need good exterior lighting. And so whether it's lights that are sensor activated or lights that are on all the time at nighttime. And I have a tendency to have lights on at nighttime because I just like the idea of being able to look out and see what's on my wraparound porch without having to turn the light on and sort of scare off the guy. So when you think about exterior lighting, you need really good lights to be able to capture what's going on. It's no use having an exterior camera if all you see is some sort of fuzzy picture and the cops get there and they go, is that some kind of a mammal? I mean, we don't even know who it is here. And obviously, when you think about interior cameras and exterior cameras and in daytime, bad guys these days, and they're being blessed by this pandemic because they get to wear masks all the time and hoodies and things like that. So smart burglars are wearing masks, they're wearing gloves, they're wearing hoodies. It's really difficult to figure out what race, what age. You can make sort of a rough guess on how tall they are and things like that, but it's tough to do. So a good camera system is going to record to a DVR. A good camera system is going to record to an NVR, network video system, or to the cloud. You'll have access to this stuff, and it has a lot of evidentiary value for the police. So let's talk a little bit about the camera systems. Back in the old days in the retail world, sometimes, and I've seen this too in hotels, and it's a mistake. And as a security consultant, when I come across this, I always tell my clients, take these out right away. People install fake cameras. So they'll get a camera that you can get online at Amazon for $60, and it has a red light on it, and it blinks, and it moves side to side, and you put it on this little swivel, and it looks like it's actually working. Fake cameras are horrible for a couple reasons. One, they don't do anything for you. Second is there is a liability issue, and this is less for people in homes, but more for people in businesses, that if you have a fake camera and somebody is injured on your property, and they thought that this camera was capturing what was going on, or they thought, and it doesn't have to be true, it's what the lawyers say, they thought that someone was going to monitor this and call the police, we get sued. So you can be sued for having a fake camera because someone says there was an expectation of security there was an expectation someone was monitoring this, there was an expectation someone was going to call the cops and save me. So I always tell my clients, and I've seen this a lot in government buildings and things, especially old school, where they put up fake cameras because they don't want to spend the money on real cameras, and they don't want to spend the money on the video system, the network capture system. Take those out. Fake cameras do not work. So when you look at a camera system, it's got to have line of sight. So you want to say, look at the 4 corners of my house, or the 6 or 8 corners of my house, exterior. What are the places I want to most protect? And so it's probably going to be the main entrance doors. It's going to be the garage area. And in internal cameras, you may have, nanny cams and things like that you can put up. These are all very cheap. Look at companies like Simply Safe, and certainly ADT has camera systems as well. You look at all the security companies have been doing this stuff for a really long time. But you can also go to, look at Google has camera systems. You can go to Home Depot. You can go to Lowe's. You can buy a camera system for a couple $100s that you can put up yourself. Simply Safe is SIMPLI, Safe, Simply Safe, is a self-install, and they promise in their ads that an even person with no technical background can put the stuff up, and in a couple hours have a really good system. So they have a kind of a check-the-box approach to how they sell you all this stuff. You go online, you say, here's the number of rooms I want to protect, here's the type of setup that I have in my house, here's where I have access to the internet, things like that. So you can get camera systems on Simply Safe, you can get window break alarms, which are very valuable. You can get door alarms and things like that and set it up yourself. The problem with those things from a convenience standpoint is, let's say you set up a really good system for alarms and someone opens a door, it goes off, or somebody opens a window or it goes off, things like that. There's just such a high false alarm rate with everybody in your house. It could be your pets that set it off. It could be your kids that set it off. You forget when you come in. It's easy to do that. So once you set up these systems, camera systems, alarm systems, Simply Safe has a $15 a month monitoring system. ADT has a whole range of programs that they can put in which have alarm monitoring as well. Then you get into that concern about the false alarm rate. So you have to make a buy-in that if you're going to get a home security system like these things with cameras and alarm systems, you've got to get a buy-in that you're going to pay attention to not setting off the thing and having so many false alarms. So look at the camera system from internal. Say, we don't need every inch of the house protected, but typically the pathways maybe into our hallways that go to our bedrooms, the areas where you would think that a burglar is most likely to look, probably not going to be the kitchen, but it's going to be the master bedrooms and places like that where we want cameras for the hallways going into these rooms. But our best approach certainly with cameras is to catch people outside, where they are in the front porch, where they are in the garage, things like that. And one of the things that's probably the most cost-effective for the front porch is Ring. And so Ring is one of those huge success stories. Started off as a small company, is now a huge company. I think it's owned by Google, if I remember correctly. But Ring doorbells, someone rings your door and you're at a restaurant, or you're at someplace out, away from your house, you can answer the door and actually confront them and see who's on the camera. So I have Ring in my house. I like it. The coverage is really good in terms of how far the thing goes out to the street. I think it's like, 50 or 60 feet, even farther. And also the quality, the clarity of the cameras for Ring doorbell alarms is quite clear. And so you think about, in the old days, how crappy the coverage was and how poor the images were for cameras in terms of how far they could see and what kind of image they gave. Now the technology is really, really quite good. So you can see really clearly. And with Ring and some of these other doorbell systems, you can capture moments of time. You can capture all the time that there's movement. It'll come on and tape anytime somebody comes to the door. And that's a good deterrent. So between dogs, which bark and make noise, between a good relationship with your neighbors who pay attention when people are in or around your house doing stuff with or without your consent, that they call you and let you know, with the idea of pretty inexpensive home security systems, pretty inexpensive camera systems, pretty inexpensive alarm systems with monitoring. You're going to get some good coverage and you'll be able to protect your property. Let me go back to this discussion I had before, which is CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. And this is a concept was started by the architects. And so a number of architects said, we will create home security and business security and building security and, office buildings and things like that, that are protected using this concept of crime prevention through environmental design. So an example we talked about, rose bushes along your windows would be crime prevention through environmental design. Hedges, tall things, tinted glass. I have tinted glass on my garage door, my garage windows. I have about 6 windows, and you can't look inside my garage and see my tools and my motorcycle and all the other stuff that's in there. Long driveways is a crime prevention through environmental design thing, especially if you have fencing like barbed wire. No crook is going to hop over a barbed wire fence and walk all the way up to your house if it's a quarter mile away and pick up something and carry it all the way out. They're just not going to do it. They're just too lazy. So think about vending machines at a hotel. Many hotels would put vending machines on the floors where people's rooms were, and they get broken into. So they said, okay, let's put the vending machine in the hotel lobby where people pass by it and there's a clerk there all the time. And then those break-ins for those machines go away. So crime prevention through environmental design has a couple of factors connected to it. One is what they call access control. And so that's what I'm big on. I'm a security guy. We talk about access control. So that's good keys for your house. That's key card systems if you work in a business. Good locks on your doors. I like, garage door locks. I like locks that you can't get in through just breaking the glass. So access control is part one of CPTED. Second one is surveillance, visibility, that you can be seen in your house from the road, and that people in your neighborhood can see you, and that they can call if there's any issues, and that you can see from various points in your house. Because of good lighting, you can see what's going on around you from a lot of parts of your house. So, you don't necessarily have to go outside. Then there's a concept called ownership or territoriality, which is you take care of your stuff. Say, this is my home, my business, our school. People have a connection to protecting the things that they do business with or where they send their kids and schools and things like that. So it's a sense of ownership and territoriality where we say, this is my neighborhood, our community, we have to protect it. And the last part of CPTED is maintenance, that we fix our camera systems if we need to. We put new batteries in our Ring system on our doorbell if we have to, that we keep this stuff up. And maintenance could include stuff like cutting away, landscaping and making sure that your property is presentable and that you can, have a kind of a pride of ownership. So when you look at CPTED, it's a way to say, how do I sort of think like a crook? How do I think about using what I have as natural barriers? For example, in my property, I have 2 kind of creek beds on either side, and they're full of brush and full of poison ivy and probably full of water moccasins and other lovely snakes and stuff like that on either side of the property. So because of the way my fencing is, it would be tough for somebody who wants to break into my house to have to cut through that part to get up to my house. That's a CPTED solution. So when you look at how, let's say for a convenience store, that they have, they don't put posters up in the window about beer and sales on cigarettes and soda because it blocks the view to the street. Those are CPTED solutions, crime prevention through environmental design. There are, depending on what community you live in, if you have a sheriff's department or a police department with an actual crime prevention unit, and some do based on their size, there are a lot of crime prevention people inside that unit. Some are sworn and some are non-sworn civilians that have been CPTED trained. There are architects that are trained to build houses and buildings that are CPTED, a thought process where they use that design. So I do a lot of library work, and libraries are oftentimes built on CPTED concepts. So think about that. Google it, look it up, CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. There may be some tips that you can get from your local PD or your local sheriff who have that CPTED background. So we look at kind of the pros and cons of some of these companies that provide alarm services. My biggest concern is sometimes for some of these alarm companies, they have kind of a low-end price. It's only $49.95 for us to come out and then when you get the bill after all the recommendations, it's over $1,000. So sometimes they come out and they go, oh yeah, we can do the $49.95 one, but what you really need is this, gold package here. We're going to give you the plastic package, but you need the bronze, the silver, or the gold package, which is, $600 for this or $800 for that. And then the alarm monitoring fees can be pretty high as well. So if you look at, companies like Simply Safe, and it's not a commercial for them, their fees tend to be lower, and they use a self-install. There's no drilling holes and things like that in your property. So you need to make some decisions about how much you want to spend and whether you want to spend a monthly fee that's pretty high versus pretty low. Can you do it with a combination of things that you get from Home Depot? Can you get it from a combination of things that you do from something like Ring for your doorbell, plus maybe a camera system that you put up on the outside of your house as opposed to the inside? So lots of possibilities on the home security piece, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to an expensive company. There's some things that you can probably do from yourself. Start off by walking your property at nighttime. Start off by walking your property in the daytime. Think like a crook. Say, how would I get into my house if I need to? If I was ever, locked out, what would be my approach to get inside? So, time for Crime Time's Stupidest Crook of the Week, and this is one of my favorite parts of the show. It's Crime Time's Stupidest Crook of the Week, where I get to talk about some of our dumbest criminals who manage to get themselves arrested based on their monumental stupidity. So, this is my own stupid crook story. Many years ago, I was sitting with my partner in my patrol car in San Diego, and we were watching this biker gang, and there was about 20 of them, and they were in this parking lot of this strip mall. And, there's usually an antagonistic relationship between those guys and the cops, and they were giving us the stink eye the whole time. And I think some of them flipped us off or something like that. And so they got up and they were going to roar away. They started up their bikes and they were revving up and they were going to roar away. And the one guy that flipped us off and seemed to be saying some stuff, we were, probably half a block away across the street watching them, and they were watching us. The one guy that was giving us the most grief forgot to put up his kickstand, and as he pulled away, he went around the corner, he fell off of his motorcycle. I laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. He wasn't injured, but it was still fun to watch him pick up his bent bike. So that's our stupid crook of the week. Let's test your Crime Time IQ with this week's crime quiz question. And I have brought a visual aid, and I am a vision of purple today. It's my birthstone. I got a purple shirt. I have a purple pen. And this device here is what? So it's, 8 by 12, something like that. It's made out of some kind of plastic. What do you think this gizmo is here? It is actually, for those of you that have guessed correctly, it is actually a ballistic panel. It is a bulletproof panel. This thing is made by a company called Hardwire. You can find it on the web. I think I got this at Amazon or their website. You can also get these for about $65 on Amazon. I've seen them up to about $100. I think I paid $100 for this about 10 years ago or 8 years ago. This ballistic panel here, what would you do with it? Well, in the rare possibility of a workplace shooting or something like that, you could put it into your backpack. You could put it under your clothing if you had a jacket on. I've seen people put it in the door panel of their car to try to hide behind that if they have to hide behind their door. You could put it into a big purse if you had it. You could put this in a backpack which you carried backwards on the front side of you as opposed to your back. You could use this to protect your kids and their backpacks and things as well. So it is a ballistic panel. It stops pretty serious. I've seen the videos here. Pretty serious rounds that come from rifles and handguns and things like that. So this is a sort of a sign of the times that we have in these days, which is these things exist as a protective device, a defensive device for the world that we're living in, which has active shooters and mall shooters and things like that. So I use this when I travel. I put it in my laptop bag. It gets through the airport with no issue. There's no TSA concerns there. It's not dangerous or anything like that. They don't even notice what it is. I use it as a shield in my tactical backpack that I have. I have a couple of these. I use it, especially again when I travel. It's in my briefcase. It's in my laptop. I can carry it around that way. So you wouldn't use it like Wonder Woman to stop bullets, but it is a potential. You could put it even between your jacket and your chest in a situation where you felt like bullets were coming in your direction. But it is a cheap insurance. $65 for a ballistic panel is not such a bad thing to have. So this week's Crime Time safety tip is connected to the ballistic panel. Let's talk about the uses for it. When you think about something like this, you want to use this on the down low. It's not something you want to advertise. Again, it's pretty low key. The ones that I have also have kind of a plastic covering, which no one seems to know what they are. So you can put it into a backpack, a big purse. You can put it into a laptop bag, something like that. Nobody ever sees that. I've seen some variations of this, which sort of break my heart. One is I've seen Kevlar ballistic blankets that they use for little kids in elementary school and for especially kindergarten. That kind of depresses me that we even have that as something on the market. The other version of this that I've seen is and it's a pretty clever idea when you think about it, is a ballistic whiteboard. So I've seen these that are on rollers and that teachers can move them around in K through 12 environments or in college and universities. It's actually a ballistic panel whiteboard that they can move around. It's about 5 or 6 feet across, and they're pretty expensive, but they do save lives. So when you think about how to protect our kids, protect your family, these things are now becoming more popular. And in the world that we're living in, where lots of people seem to have guns and lots of people seem to want to shoot folks, in mass shootings and in schools and theaters and workplaces and places like that, we have some other alternatives, some other tools for our toolkit. This ballistic panel here, and again, lightweight, thin, $65 on Amazon. Take a look at the possibilities here. Again, this one by Hardwire is not a bad choice. There are some that are a little cheaper that you can get, and it may save your life. So thanks for listening to this episode of Crime Time. I encourage you to go to my website. It's crimetimeradio.com. Send me an email with questions and topics that you want me to cover on future shows. Connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Dr. Steve Albrecht. That's Albrecht on LinkedIn. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Steve Albrecht. And that's, again, Dr. and then Steve and then my last name, Albrecht. In our world, there are sheep and shepherds and wolves. And too many people are sheep and too few people are shepherds. There are a lot of wolves out there. There are not enough police officers or sheriff's deputies to protect us all. So you need to be a shepherd. Take care of yourself and protect your family and your loved ones and your friends and your coworkers. Pay attention. Be prepared to defend yourself with legal force if necessary. Be a good witness for the police if you see a crime. Stay safe and aware and alert at home, at work, at school, and even on the road. One of the topics we'll talk about on a future show is road rage. I write a blog for Psychology Today. One of the most popular blogs I ever wrote in the 12 years that I've written that column for them, that blog for them, psychologytoday.com, was about road rage. I have been on the air through Zoom and Skype and things like that, and YouTube, in Singapore, South Africa, Taiwan, Japan, Australia, Canada, talking about road rage. One of these days, I'm going to write a book about road rage because I seem to have a lot of stories that have come to my attention from people around it. So we'll talk about road rage one of these days. So stay safe at home and at work and at school and on the road. And thanks for listening to Crime Time this week. My thanks to Jim Whining, as always, and producer Matt, and all the good folks at Axe Media Group. I'm Steve Albrecht, and thanks for listening to What I Know is Right.